There's a kind of laughter that doesn't come from joy. It comes from somewhere deeper, somewhere heavier, somewhere you don't show anyone. You're in a room full of people and something lands wrong. A comment, a silence, a moment that touches something real. And before anyone can notice, you've already made a joke about it. The room laughs, the tension dissolves, and something inside your chest quietly tightens instead of releasing. You tell yourself it's nothing. You're just funny. You're just easygoing. You've always been the one who keeps things light. But somewhere underneath that laughter, you know something has gone unspoken. Not once, not recently, but for years. That's what hiding pain with humor actually looks like. It's not the absence of feeling, it's the performance of not feeling. Psychologists call this a coping mechanism, a learned emotional strategy where the mind uses laughter to carry what it was never taught to express any other way. It's what your mind does when it has learned that showing pain out loud costs more than hiding it. It's like a fuse that trips before the system overloads, not to punish you, but to keep everything running. The laughter steps in before the pain can reach the surface. And yet the cruel irony of hiding your pain with humor is this: the same laughter that protects you from being seen also prevents you from being known. The shield you built to keep things light also keeps people from ever reaching what's underneath. If you've ever felt that way, like you're always performing and never quite arriving, you're not fake, you're not shallow, you're in survival mode. See, your brain is wired to find the safest way to process what it feels. When honesty felt risky, it found laughter instead. It wasn't trying to silence you, it was trying to keep you safe. But that survival mode comes with a cost. Because when people hide their pain with humor long enough, they start to lose access to the very thing the humor was built to protect. The ability to feel openly, to grieve fully, to be honest without performing. There's a concept in psychology called emotional masking. It describes the way certain people learn to display one emotion on the surface while carrying something entirely different underneath. And the people who are the funniest, the most quick-witted, the ones everyone calls the life of the room, they are often the ones who've masked the hardest. They've learned that raw emotion makes people uncomfortable, so they built a stage, and they've performed on that stage for so long, they've started mistaking the character for themselves. The truth, humor used to hide pain, is not lightness, it's weight that learned to smile. People who hide their pain with humor often don't notice when the pattern deepens. It creeps in gradually. They stop sharing the real thing and start sharing the edited version. They stop crying in front of people, not because they've healed, but because the reflex to perform has become faster than the instinct to feel. Research from psychologist James Pennebaker found that chronic emotional suppression carries real physiological cost: elevated cortisol, disrupted sleep, immune response weakened quietly from the inside. The body remembers what the joke tried to erase. It's the mother who makes everyone laugh at family dinners while privately falling apart. It's the man who deflects every serious question with a punchline because he was taught that vulnerability is weakness. It's the friend who texts the funniest replies to news that broke them in silence. And it's the child who learned early that the only emotion that was safe to show was laughter. Most people who hide their pain with humor didn't choose to become the funny one. They were shaped into it by repetition. by the same silences when they tried to be honest, the same discomfort when they showed something raw, the same lesson arriving over and over that the world receives laughter far more willingly than it receives pain. So they stopped showing pain, not out of weakness, but out of a wisdom that turned heavy. Because what's the point of being honest if every time you are, the room goes quiet and no one knows what to say? But here's where the psychology of hiding pain with humor meets something hopeful. The brain is not fixed. The same mind that learned to mask can learn to unmask. But hold on to that thought. Because before we get there, there's something more important to understand about what this pattern actually costs. So that's the pattern. Humor as shield, shield as reflex, reflex as identity. But here's where it goes deeper. Because eventually the mind learns a quiet equation. If honesty equals discomfort, then humor equals safety. And so it adapts. But adaptation isn't healing, it's management. And management isn't the same as release. Sometimes it shows up as deflection, the joke that arrives a half second before the real answer would have. Sometimes it shows up as distance, pulling away from anyone who gets close enough to see past the laughter. Sometimes it shows up as exhaustion, the bone-deep tiredness of performing lightness when nothing inside feels light at all. For some, it's the inability to cry even when they want to. For others, it's the strange loneliness of being surrounded by people who love the version of them that isn't entirely real. Underneath all of it is the same quiet whisper. I just want someone to ask me how I really am and actually wait for the answer. And maybe that's where the real shift begins. Not in learning to stop being funny, but in learning that the unfunny parts of them deserve to be heard too. And maybe that's the real paradox of people who hide their pain with humor. The funniest people in the room are often the ones who have felt the most deeply. They were the ones who noticed the tension before anyone spoke about it, who sensed the sadness in a room before anyone acknowledged it, who carried emotions so large and so vivid that the only way to survive them was to translate them into something the world could receive without flinching. They were built to feel, but feeling became the thing that cost them the most. So they found a way to keep feeling without anyone seeing it. And that way was laughter. But laughter alone doesn't release pain. Because pain hidden with humor isn't time-based, it's trust-based. It doesn't fade because years pass. It softens only when someone finally earns the right to hear what's underneath the joke. And stays. And here is what I promise to come back to. The reason people who hide their pain with humor can't simply stop is because humor became their nervous system's first language for pain, long before they had any other option available. And that's what most people misunderstand. They assume these people are avoidant, dishonest, emotionally shallow. But the truth is simpler and sadder than that. They are afraid of being seen without the armor, afraid of saying the real thing and watching someone not know what to do with it, afraid that the person underneath the humor, raw, unperformed, unprotected, might be too much for the people they love. Because humor built in pain doesn't dissolve with confrontation. It dissolves in the presence of safety, not pressure, not forced honesty, just someone who stays when the laughter stops. If you've been living behind that laughter, please hear this. You are not weak for hiding. You were protecting yourself in the only language the world let you speak. But your story doesn't have to end behind the punchline. Somewhere inside, the part of you that once cried without shame, that felt things fully before learning to make them funny, that trusted people with the unedited version of your pain. It's still there. It's waiting for you to stop performing long enough to hear it again. And maybe that doesn't start with some grand confession. Maybe it starts with a pause, a moment where the joke is ready, but you let the silence sit instead. Maybe it starts with a single honest sentence that isn't wrapped in humor. I'm not okay, and I don't need to be funny about it right now. And healing begins when you start noticing those moments. When a song stirs something you would normally laugh off. When a conversation gets close to the real thing and you feel the reflex to deflect. Those moments are not dangers, they are doors. So don't rush it. Don't force the mask off before it's ready to come down. Just keep going, even with the jokes, even with the deflections, even with the laughter that still arrives a beat before the honesty can. Because somewhere along the way, without announcing it, something will begin to shift. You'll make a joke and then, for the first time, say the quiet thing that was underneath it. You'll let someone sit with you in the silence after the laughter fades and not rush to fill it. And one morning you'll realize that you stopped needing the humor to protect you from your own pain. Not because you became less funny, but because you finally found people, or maybe just one person, who wanted the version of you that existed before the punchline. And that quiet moment, when the humor is still there but no longer carrying the weight alone, is one of the most profound forms of healing a person who hid their pain with laughter will ever experience.